Here we go. Patch 13 notes. Here we go. The All-Stars on the top. Big nerfs. Annie needed it. Aphelios needed it. All these champions were problems. Wukong and Vi were not problems. These guys were left over from last year's meta, and they kept on getting played in pro because these teams are very comfortable and early in the season. They're going to continue using what was working last split. I really don't think that these guys are in the same strength that they were in. So Vi and Wukong, if you're a casual player, stay away from these champions. Wukong can be fine top. They only hit the jungle clearing, but we'll go into that. And buffs to Lee Sin and Nidalee changes the tempo of pro entirely, right? This is going to bring about a meta. So we'll go and check out all the things that are happening. Big news, ranked rewards, and the season end date. The date to note is July 17th at midnight. So you have to get your games done by 15 minutes before then if you're in Master to try to get your rewards for those tiers. But this is the whole reload section. We don't really need to see that. Champions, Annie, Q magic damage decrease. It's just a 10 and 5% AP, so it's hitting her laning, her support, her mid, and her ratios. This is a very big nerf. She's still going to be good. The kit is very solid. She's going to be okay, but this is a big nerf that will allow other poking champions into the environment. Aphelios, all right, kind of complex, probably the most complicated champion in the entire game, right up there with Azir, so we're going to read through everything. Aphelios is the number one bot laner in pro play by a long shot, right? And this was after 1 week. He had like 226 plays. Next highest champion was 120. So almost twice as much as any other champion. And has been a top performer since March. As such, we want to act in order to create more variety in the bot lane. Please and thank you. Also, we don't really want to see this champion in mid and low ELO because he's insanely complicated and a lot of people are playing him. So hopefully this nerf will take him out of pro and people will stop playing him in low ELO. We know it sucks for players at home to catch strays like this, but he's still in a much stronger spot than he was at the start of the year. This time around, we're targeting some of his biggest ability outliers that provide frustrating levels of power. His turret deals too much DPS for a basic ability. Infernum Q provides him best-in-class sustain by a large margin, that is true, and Gravitum's gank setup is very high for a basic ability. Basically what has happened is the pro level has scripted a use for all of the abilities and how to combine things. So you go red, white, and then you have green, white ready, and then you have flamethrower and gravitum together, and then you go with gravitum, boom, you hit the AoE, and then you swap guns into the chakram. And so they just basically have scripted out everything that can be done, and all of these permutations of or combinations of weapons is what makes them so powerful. So basically, to nerf that, they're going to have to take away the strength of every gun. Now, every gun was kind of tuned above and beyond everything because you weren't supposed to have much say in what gun you had. But now that people have actually figured out everything to do, they're going to have to hit all of them. All right, Severum, the Scythe Pistol. Lifesteal on stacks is going down a significant amount. All right, 0.5% early and 2% late is a big chunk. Lifesteal on your abilities also getting hit by 3% early and 13% late, or 12 and a quarter. So huge hit to the best in class sustain here. Gravitum, the slow duration on attacks. So they're keeping the root intact, but they're making the attacks only go for 1 second. Now, this is important because of the interactions with Flamethrower in particular. Crescendum, the Chakram, Sentry base attack speed is going down by a significant amount, all right? And this is important because this 0.8 gets amplified by every attack speed item that Aphelios bought. Okay, so now your ratios are going down by 14. So this isn't just a 1/6 of a second nerf. This is 0.16 and then amplify that by every bit of extra attack speed that you get. So this is a huge nerf as well. Hopefully this is enough to take Aphelios out of the forefront. He's been too good. I imagine pros will still stick with him because of the team fight and the hyper carry power that you can get. And he's one of the best carries at dealing damage up front in a fight, which is something that is at a premium. There's not many carries that can do that. Ivern was a huge problem in the jungle. Bonus magic damage on hit is going down by 10 and losing 10% AP. This is a big big nerf, okay? Because think about how much you're attacking over the course of the game. Not so much in the jungle, but as you're going into lanes, there's basically been a build. This was a free better than Nashor's Tooth on a champion that could also buy Nashor's Tooth. So a big hit to his laning and his ganking. Daisy base movement speed, this was an overfix. They went from 416 to 440. I think they thought they were going 420 to 440, but the truth is Daisy's speed was 416. So this actually created a lot of cases where it was impossible to get away from her. And they want to have some champions be able to do it, some champions not, right, with upgraded boots. So this will affect all the champions. Take a look at your champion and whether or not you hit this threshold and whether or not you'll be able to get away from Daisy. Now, keep in mind that a lot of times she'll have the E on her, which will slow you anyways, so keep that in mind. The slam damage is also going down by 20. Still has a fantastic AP ratio, though, so keep on building AP here. It's going to hit the on-hit for sure, but I still think that Nashor's Tooth is a good fourth item on Ivern. The Kindred, base health and armor decrease. This is what they do to champions that are just too strong. They either hit their AD or just their base stats. This is big, okay? 30 base health and 3 base armor means that you're going to be able to kill the Kindred in 2 less attacks, all right? Definitely 1 less, and in some cases 2, all right? And because Lee Sin and Nidalee are getting buffed, which are 2 of the most aggressive junglers in the entire game, this will be felt the most, right? This is felt the most at early game. This is also important for mid versus low versus elite play. In high ELO, they're good at kiting. They're not taking damage, so they don't really feel this in the jungle as far as the clear. You do get hit a couple times here and there, but they mostly kite very effectively. In mid and low, though, this means that she's going to take a big hit to her damage. This will affect your ability to gank and steal Gromp the way like red buff into Gromp steal. That became very popular. Lee Sin, Q damage increased, but it's all scaling, okay? It's 5% on the bonus AD, 5% here, 5% on the max as well, 10% on the maximum damage from Resonating Strike, which I think is at like if they're 30% health or lower. So this is all based on bonus AD scaling. So this is after you buy your items and a tiny bit from your runes. So it is going to give you a little bit of extra damage, teensy tiny early, but this is going to be felt in his scaling, his impact later in the game. He's already pretty decent early, so they're giving him some weapons to be stronger. So if you're snowballing on Lee Sin, you should be able to do a little bit more with it. All right, Nico, big problem. They're going to address her big problem. All right, here's big problem number 1. A very short, or like we'll say near best in class spam ability on her Q is going up by 2 seconds early. This is huge. Also important because sometimes you put 3 points in your Q because it was enough to clear waves, and then you'd go into your E, or you'd put any amount of points into E. Now that's going to be hurt even more. So you really have to go 5 points in your Q to get the damage, to get the cooldown back. The Shape Splitter, this is going to affect her jungle clear. It's going down by 10 base damage. All right. So this is going down 10 early, but going up 10 later. So your base clear and your poke in lane is going to lose a huge chunk of damage. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't say huge chunk of damage. If you're good and you're playing well, you're proccing this on them. It's going to deal 10 less damage. This is going to affect support and mid. And then in the jungle especially, where you're really using this a lot, right? Your camp takes 9 attacks, we'll say. This is 30 less damage, so now you're going to need 1 more attack to clear that big minion. And the big problem case, there are a lot of arguments saying that Galio lost his ability to taunt flash, so why is Pop Blossom Flash allowed to work? They're basically getting rid of that. From 1 1/4 down to half of a half second of being invulnerable. Obfuscated, all right, where you're hiding the fact that you're casting it. So now there's 3/4 of a second. This will be big, huge in pro play because they are all fast enough to look for this and find it. There was, a lot of people memed on, hey, you can't count your minions, but every bit of information, like think how hard it is to recall after a fight who flashed or who used what abilities, and like being able to be very precise about when it happened. Imagine like trying to keep track of all that, but there's also a random minion be like, oh wait, that's Nico. That thought process has to go from your eyes to your brain to your muscles and then make the appropriate reaction. The more that nerve kind of superhighway works, the more rehearsal you get of it, the better you'll get at it. But still, It's still like a problem when the people who play against it 100 times still can't dodge anything. So this is going to be a huge hit in pro. The champion is getting nerfed. She's still fantastic, and she's super, super fun to play and super gratifying to play because you can make tons of plays. So absolutely still highly recommend Nico if you're looking for a champion to main. Nidalee's base movement speed is increasing by 5, all right? May not seem like much, but this is the ability of getting in and out of ganks and jungles. And the fact that you're always going to be faster than everybody, all right, that's what makes this key. Since you're faster, you're never at risk, right? You can always choose when the fight is going to be over. So what this means is Nidalee can invade willy-nilly, all right? Basically, you can go in, go for your procs. The one thing you need to be careful of, don't jump in unless you know you can get out. Most times what this is going to be is stay in human form, poke, 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 throw your Q, make sure your animation canceling. This is a big buff if you use it correctly. Rek'Sai, for the second time, has made it to the top of our jungle tier and still didn't get seen in pro play. I had a pretty heated conversation with Jankos about it 2 years ago. It's like, what are you doing? This is your champ. Why aren't you like forcing your team to let you pick this? It's incredibly strong. Anyways, it was at that strength again, and they got the gut nerf. All right, 40 base HP makes you much weaker in those early fights, and 3 base attack damage. This is going to hit all your abilities, all your scaling, everything about it. So Rek'Sai is taking a huge hit. She needed it because she was winning at about 56% in high ELO. So absolutely still going to be playable at that level, but it won't be the top of the tier. And if you're low level, it's not worth picking her up anymore because her stats will be in line. Basically, she's one of those champions that you have to learn the whole kit, play 50 games, get used to the sonar, when and how to gank. Very complex champion. So at this point, I would not recommend it if you're in mid or low. If you're a Rek'Sai one trick, you're not going to enjoy the free low that you were getting, like 61% on one tricks, 62%, I think. But you're still going to have a fine champion. You probably expect to win like 58% of the time now. Rel, basically, with all of the changes that they made, they overbuffed her for support, taking away some of the jungle power. So they're trying to level that out, and that's what we just did in this game. They took away support power, and they gave it to the jungle. They gave her extra damage across the board, and check this out, plus 20 to plus 40, 470 base damage, okay? And this gets amplified as well. This is a big deal for clearing, and we saw it in that game. EQ, I one-shot the big Krug. That's a lot of damage, okay? It also gave us one of the best executes in the game as far as dealing total damage to Baron plus a smite. The EQ combo is a ton of extra damage with an AP ratio, so she's very strong in those 50-50s in the pit, so make sure you're using that combination unless you want to use those spells to go engage on the enemy jungler. But look at all these other stats, right? Magic resistance growth going down, base MR going down, health regen going down. These are to hit laning, right? This is when you're getting poked in lane. They want the poke to deal more damage, and they want it to stick more, okay? And that's what's going on here. The magic resistance growth will get felt across the board, but still, you're building Abyssal Mask. It's an incredibly strong item. She's going to have enough MR, and between that and even Shroud, you should have enough. The other changes, Crash Down Shield is being reduced early, okay, 20 to 25. It's a pretty big change. You're still getting maximum HP, so that's why you're building Demonic Embrace off of it. A lot of people have still been maxing this. It's not the one you max. Q, now that Q's just a stun, you should take Q max. It is spammable, it is high damage, it is a very easy to hit, and you can combo it with your E to get really good animation. So EQ on the play. Bonus damage to monsters, again, going up by 20 on full tilt. So we saw that game that we were very effective. A little bit slow on our first clear, actually. We did spend some time hovering towards Aurelia, so we can go back and see whether or not that had anything to do with it. Varus was a big problem, and people finally caught on to Nashor's Tooth. So this is what the patch notes are saying. AP Varus has been causing some problems. They are increasing 5% of the ratio here, but they're taking away some of the effect of the max HP burn per stack. And basically you were hitting them 3 times. So picture 3 stacks. Then you were doubling it when you activated the ability to go for Q. So when you think of it that way, this 1% is really like 6%. So it's a pretty big deal. It's still very, very strong. And the fact that the base ratio is still here. The fact like you have got 300 AP, you're going to hit for 15 extra damage on your way up, but you're going to miss out on a lot of it on the execute. I still think best lane is actually going to be in bottom. The top one, people just kind of weren't punishing enough. It's still an immobile champion. Yes, the E is one of the best laning abilities in the entire game, and you can play from long range. But still, if there's a Varus in your game and they're going top lane, please gank them. That's really the change to make there. Shield scaling here is going down by 3%. This is the passive. This is largely best in pro, because they're going to use all of these shields and cooldowns kind of on tap. They're really keeping track of making sure that the passive is on all the time. So this helps with your ability to take all the camps, stay full health, stay fully charged, and also in the fights. So you're basically in one fight, you're going to lose about 6% of your maximum health now for a long fight, because you'll be able to get that opening passive shield off and a second one oftentimes. So 6% less maximum health. And then the big change right here, 140 seconds on this level 1 ultimate cease and desist, and it goes down to 90. So the scaling's not awful, but still 140 seconds. This means you're going to have to be very, very precise with your first gank on Vi, and you need it to work. So take the time, make sure to set it up, make sure that you're in the right spot. Don't reach, because you're not going to get another chance, and you are going to be weak to other junglers for the next 2 minutes after you play this. Wukong losing just 20%. He already got the gut check stat nerf where they just lost 3 AD 2 patches ago. So really in a tough spot for Wukong. I do not recommend him for playing jungle right now. Duskblade of Drakthar. This was a very interesting patch note. They say, like, we can't figure out how to make this work, so we're just taking it away. If you get a takedown while channeling, you will no longer get the proc. That mostly hits Samira and Misfortune in the bot lane, who have these big channeling ults where you expect to get a kill, but then you are supposed to be vulnerable, and it was taking away that vulnerability. Now it's gone. So this is a huge hit, absolutely huge hit to Samira and Misfortune builds. I expect both of them to go over to Yumu's Ghostblade. You might start seeing some crit strike builds again on Samira, but that's going to force her into later scaling, where she was very, very strong here, especially when she completed it. So she was really strong at 6. She was strong at 11 minutes when you finish your item, and she was still strong through to level 11. And 2 items, because you'd be able to get your first kill, go through the fight. That's going to be gone. So that big window is going to be now a weakness for Samira. She did get, like, 7 straight patches of scaling buffs. So she will be fine in the end game with crit. Keep an eye on that. But you're going to have to change the build with this. I don't see her getting kills early enough where you can be invulnerable and then go to proc it. If you have a team comp that has multiple divers, then I can see this. You still buy it, and you try to get the kill, go invulnerable, and then go for the getting in position to go for an ult. But that, it seems like that playstyle is just going to be in a tough spot. Another item that hit her and hit Ezreal of the World, Essence Reaver. They basically want to change all of the Sheen items so that we could read through it. Basically, here's the change. Spellblade damage is going from 100% of your base AD and 40% scaling. Now it's 130% of your base AD and only 20% scaling. So Gangplank and Ezreal are going to feel some of this as they get into their end game builds, especially if you're going, obviously the AD builds. But now that it's only hitting 20% of your bonus AD, you can actually feel comfortable with some hybrid builds as Ezreal. As Gangplank, it's going to be a net loss. I think they reference one other, Rengar being the other one. Rengar, who could get insane amounts of damage, and the fact that he was building lethality meant that this is a huge nerf to him. It's still going to probably be his best item. All right, it's going to be a big nerf to the damage, but this base AD is going to be fine. It does also mean that as a base AD ratio, this will now be one of the highest damage abilities for melee top laners. So keep an eye on these. Anybody who is a melee top laner, you can look at this site. If you just go to the LoL wiki and you go to champion health, and it'll actually give you everyone's health here. You can go same thing, champion damage, all right? Which is totally the one I meant to go. No, do we just miss it? It's not no damage. Just have to type it as damage. List of find champions. List of champion damage. Okay, there we go. So here we go. The big winners are going to be someone like Alawi. You could go Darius, although I don't really recommend it. Yorick actually has really good scaling on this, although he tends to go with Trinity Force. So you can see like some of these champions where it might come up. There's not much in the way of crit ratios for most of these guys, but pretty notably here is Tryndamere. So you can go Nabori Quickblades and Essence Reaver, actually get a huge chunk of damage out and be okay with it. This also potentially opens up values for Jhin and for Graves, who can get these procs off pretty easily. It's a very good item on Jhin because it gives you extra cooldown as well. So keep an eye on these champions that are going to have these changes. All right, and the big losers of the patch, LeBlanc. They said that they were going to target the dashing. They ended up not doing that. Instead, they hit the ability to hit minions, and this is what they intended all along, because they made reference in the last patch note that we want Static Shiv to help with wave clear, but it shouldn't be one-shotting. And yet the 50% ratio meant that with one AP item, literally just one, you buy an Amplifying Tome plus Static Shiv, you just erase the entire wave, and that's it. So a lot of games you could start with as an AP champion, Dark Seal and Refillable, and then you just rush Static Shiv and you kill the whole wave. Now that's gone. All right, so you're still going to have it. This is a huge nerf. I cannot understate this enough, overstate it enough. This changes the entire pattern for how these champions were being played and being overpowered. Now you can still charge it. They kept the dash, so anyone who's dashing and getting 2 dashes off will still be able to double proc this. They can go up to a wave. If you're LeBlanc, you auto attack the front line, you W under the front line, you W back, you take a step, that's 90 charges again, you take one more step, you Static Shiv a second time, and that kills the wave. But now the fact that you have to do it twice really makes a difference. It's still only going to be one W to push the entire wave, but that extra couple steps is going to make a big difference. It's another 4 seconds you have to use every single time that you're approaching a wave. So a big nerf. This was the part that was crazy. Like, why did it have a 125 AP ratio? The rest of it had 50. Now, they are addressing the other part. 50% AP was the same as Lichbane. So basically, if your champion had any AD ratios, you were better off buying Static Shiv than Lichbane. They're finally addressing that. They're taking away 20% of the AP here. So no longer should the Fizzes and Akalis of the world... I'm going to keep Akali on this list because she's got hybrid ratios. But LeBlanc, it's going to be much harder for her to make use of this. The 30% AP scaling you could still get from Lichbane. This is something that Bobkin was kind of wrong about. He's like, LeBlanc didn't have any scaling, which was, kind of true. You get outscaled by AD carries, but no one was buying the item that gave him the most extra scaling in the end of the game. When you look at end game builds, if you put Nashor's Tooth and Lichbane at the end of your mage builds, everyone talks about weaving in autos and that being the difference between getting to your threshold of damage and not. When you have Nashor's Tooth and Lichbane, you're talking about an extra 70 to 90% of your AP ratio happening. It helps you with clearing waves. It helps you with objective damage. So people should really start considering Nashor's Tooth as a build topper. Sometimes if you have a really passive lane, you can go Nashor's Tooth early on a champion like Orianna. Now that it has the cooldown on it, you can still use it, help yourself clear waves, and you can actually take those fights in side lanes because you deal a significant amount of damage. So we'll probably see more of those, and we should see less of these. The other item that got nailed with this 0% AP scaling on the Stormrazor is enormous, gargantuan. This was flying under the radar, but was actually in some cases even better than Static Shiv on AP champions. And largely, if you went Static Shiv, 3 AP items, and then Stormrazor, that was the maximum amount of damage that you could deal to anybody, just compounding these AP ratios. It's like casting 2 more spells on people. And so those are gone. You're instead getting compensated with 75 base damage, but you're losing percent on AD. So this is largely just going to be, I need to get some amount of power in my lane. I feel like this item's actually gutted now because it's going to be such a huge hit to your scaling, the fact that you're losing out on this big AD ratio. So stay away from Stormrazor from now on, all right? There's really going to be better options. ARAM adjustments, if you care, you can take a peek at those. We've got the Mythic Shop rotation and some bug fixes and quality of life changes. There's one in particular that we want to look at. Fixed several issues that were causing the practice tool to be inaccessible. There may still be some issues on the PBE, but practice tool is expected to be functioning again on live with the patch. So let's just confirm that. Training, practice tool. Okay, still not 5v5. That's unacceptable. Okay, this is just from a policy. I thought that they were taking it down to fix it and actually work. This is completely unacceptable. Hello, Riot, if you're here, please heed my call. Pros need to be able to practice. Thank you for taking away the ranked restriction, all right, so that they don't need to play solo queue. All right, a lot of people misidentified that as a change, like, oh, they're making it so scabs can play, and maybe that was it, but the better consequence was pros don't need to play in solo queue anymore. They shouldn't have to. They don't want to. They get burned out. It's unnecessary tax on their time. And the people who are good enough to get into pros games to begin with are people who might make it to pro. All right. They don't need that extra incentive, because a long time ago, what they basically said is, we want pros to get into games because it feels great when you're a casual player and you get into a game with a pro. It's like, holy shit, I'm in a game against Licorice. Sweet, like, I'm going to try my best and get stomped anyways. And be like, tell my friends that I played against Licorice, and that's cool. Except Licorice hates being there, right? Notoriously, probably the number one player that was against it, that would just rather spend all of his time in 1v1s and practicing against other people for the laning phase and just practice. Solo queue is not good practice. It's completely different from pro. Completely. The comms are different. You cannot go. Even Champions queue was not good enough as a replacement. And that died because, again, these players got exhausted. Give us a functioning tool, please. Riot, I want to be able to have a 5v5 with my pro team. All right? I want to be able to take my mid-jungle support and the second tier AD carry in top lane and play against the other 5 like this and balance out my teams and battle and actually discuss things. The other things that we need access to is chrono break. We need to be able to take a situation from a game and plug it in and say, play, go, stop, rinse, play, do it again, and actually be able to drill. All right, this is unacceptable that this game does not have it. Please fix it. That's the end of that. Bug fixes, it's worth checking out to see if your champion is on here. Oftentimes you'll see little interactions, and sometimes it opens up or closes doors. Upcoming skins and chromas. There we go. Looking good as always. And we're going to have Star Guardian. And I think we're about to have a huge amount of skins coming out across all platforms for the Soul Fighter event. So those have been released. If you want to take a look, make sure to check those out. So that's it for the patch notes. There we go with the overview again. If you have any questions or if you have some thoughts, make sure to leave them in the comments below. I appreciate everybody hanging out, and thanks again for tuning in. If you haven't checked it out, the last videos were fantastic about dealing with stress, and we're going to be talking about optimizing next. So make sure to subscribe and stay tuned for more. All right, thanks guys. Peace.